Positionality recognizes that our identities and experiences influence how we understand knowledge, people, and place. The most important ingredient in cultural competence is self-knowledge. Bishop and Dirksen 2020. I'm a non-Aboriginal pre-service teacher living and learning on Bidjigal land of the Eora Nation. My upbringing as a second-generation Chinese Australian in a Eurocentric schooling system has resulted in my understanding being shaped by formal schooling rather than lived experiences with Indigenous communities. Reflecting on such aspects of me has positioned me to reflect on cultural assumptions that shape my worldview and to recognise the importance of engaging respectfully with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders' ways of knowing, being and doing. Furthermore, I recognise that I have benefited from the private schooling system, which meant that I had access to greater educational resources and opportunities that placed me at an advantage in terms of education of Indigenous perspectives. I realised this especially after talking to some of my classmates in this course and discovering that they had little to no education on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture. However, I do recognise that these understandings have been mediated through institutional and non-Indigenous standpoints. Recognising this positionality serves as a doorway through which I can look back on to question my own assumptions and also understand the limits of my viewpoint. Attending an Anglican private school meant that studies of religion was a compulsory HSC subject. Throughout this unit, I studied a variety of diverse belief systems, introducing me to how all-encompassing Aboriginal worldviews are, including the concept of country as kin. It allowed me to take away the important lesson that an Aboriginal standpoint is not a performance or a display of identity, nor a platform for presenting unexamined self-narratives as research, but a complex lived reality in a framework of law, relations, knowledge, and practice. Yunka Porter and Shillingsworth 2020. While this learning undoubtedly deepened my respect for Aboriginal perspectives, I also recognise that learning from Aboriginal peoples and communities themselves is irreplaceable. Furthermore, my everyday consumption of media also contributes to my positionality in the education that I have or have not received about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Upon reflection, I recognise that much of the media I encounter every single day privileges narratives of deficit, conflict, and social disadvantage, often reducing Aboriginal peoples to issues to be solved rather than holders of sophisticated knowledge systems. This became particularly evident during our Week 3 tutorial, where I came to understand that these deficit discourses are not only perpetuated through mainstream media, but also by political leaders. Learning that former Prime Ministers blatantly and publicly dismissed the profound and ongoing harm experienced by the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people challenged my assumptions about the neutrality of national narratives. As these portrayals became normalised, I rarely questioned how these representations reinforced dominant colonial narratives. Knowing this now leads me to critically reflect on my positionality in my future teaching career and my pedagogy as an educator, ensuring that my practices do not replicate the same silences that have long marginalised the lived realities of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. As a future secondary visual arts teacher, I understand that my positionality will shape essentially every aspect of my pedagogy, including the way I build relationships, interpret students' experiences, and make decisions about teaching and learning. My role is not neutral. Thus, I think it is essential to be aware of the power I hold within the classroom and the ways my worldview can influence things like curriculum choices and behaviour, but also more subject-specific things like how I select artworks and frame culture as a huge factor in the art world, including Indigenous artworks. By doing this, I hope to create a space for more respectful and truthful understandings of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander histories, cultures, and artistic practices. As Bishop and Dirksen 2020 note, teachers are encouraged and actively taught how to reflectively develop a critical self-awareness of themselves as racialized and culturalized beings to more effectively work with culturally diverse student populations. This reminds me that critical self-awareness is not optional, but critical to ethical teaching practices. Bishop and Dirksen 2020 also suggests that good teachers came to appreciate their position as guests in the community. This idea is particularly important to me as it serves as a reminder to me that teaching is not about claiming authority over Aboriginal knowledge, but about spreading its rich history of its culture with respect and accountability. In visual arts, this is especially significant, as Aboriginal art cannot be treated tokenistically to represent one culture. Instead, I approach Indigenous artworks and visual practices with care and context, ensuring I do plenty of research before teaching them to students, making sure students have a deep understanding of their connection to country, identity, and community. Ongoing learning, listening, and relational accountability will take place throughout my whole career as a teacher, as I want to create a culturally safe space and critically informed classroom where Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander knowledges are honoured respectfully.